Hello, hello, and welcome back to the one and only, as far as I know, Powerpuff Girls / MoJo JoJo's Bizarre Adventure podcast, MoJo JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I'm Raven.
And I'm Alison.
This week in Powerpuff Girls news, we have two items. First, Craig McCracken responded on Twitter to a fan saying that technically there isn't a Powerpuff Girls series, reboot series in the works. We are simply in development of possibly making something PPG related in the future. He didn't clarify to another fan that he is still involved with the project, just that there isn't a PPG project currently in production. I'm still 100% developing something PPG related, and development is a long process, especially in the state of today's animation industry. The other piece of news is that in August we're getting some new official How to Draw the Powerpuff Girls books. There are 4. How to Draw the Powerpuff Girls and Vile Villains, Favorite Friends, Mean Monsters, and Playful Pets. They are already available for pre-order on Amazon. And so, with that, this week we are going to be discussing the episodes Buttercrush and Fuzzy Logic. I will start off by talking about Buttercrush. Alright, so we meet the Gangrene Gang for the first time by having them steal a ball from some kids at the park. I'm going to talk about some fun facts about the Gangrene Gang. Ace, Big Billy, and Grubber are all voiced by Jeff Bennett, while Snake and Little Arturo are voiced by Tom Kenny, though Arturo was originally voiced by Carlos Alazraqui, who I believe when we were watching, after we were watching the episode, you pointed out that he was the voice of the Taco Bell dog.
Yes.
So just like, shout out to whoever was in charge of casting for picking voice actors with such great range, just like in general, but just to have so many people who are able to do so many different voices for the show is really cool. The Gangrene Gang were created as a tribute to Ed Roth, the creator of Ratfink. In Fusion Fall, the Gangrene Gang are a band with an amnesiac Buttercup who calls herself Belladonna. And in 2018, Ace temporarily joined the virtual band Gorillaz for their album The Now Now, replacing the band's bassist, Murdoch Nichols, which was when I got really into Gorillaz because they brought Ace in. And the Gangrene Gang are my absolute favorite Powerpuff Girls villains. Also, in the English dub of the anime Powerpuff Girls Z, Snake is a girl named Ivy, and a lot of fans include Ivy in their fanfiction as Snake's sister. Back to the episode, the Gangrene Gang are kind of taking the ball away from these kids and harassing them, and Ace objects to being called Mister by the kids, saying there are no misters here. So they kind of like start pummeling the poor kids until the Powerpuff Girls show up, and Ace plays innocent. Buttercup giggles, and you can kind of see the moment that Ace decides to use her crush on him to his advantage. Later on, the Pokeoks class goes on a field trip to the museum where the Gangrene Gang try to use valuable artifacts to get a soda out of the machine. Blossom and Bubbles get into a fight with Snake, Grubber, Big Billy, and Little Arturo, but Ace sweet talks Buttercup into distracting her sisters and getting Ace a soda. During the night, Buttercup sneaks off to get into mischief at the junkyard with the Gangrene Gang. Snake objects to Buttercup being there because she's a Powerpuff Girl, but Buttercup punches him, and Ace and Co. seem to get along with her after that. In the morning, Buttercup leaves after a long night of mischief, and the rest of the Gangrene Gang genuinely wish her goodbye and are excited to make a new friend. But Ace only wants Buttercup on their side, so they stay out of real trouble. Buttercup was also invited back the next night, which is when the Gangrene Gang planned to strike. Grubber calls Bubbles and Blossom in the middle of the night, poorly impersonating Buttercup's voice to do so. But in later episodes, Grubber is able to perfectly mimic others. Grubbercup tells Bubbles that his foot is stuck and he needs help, and Bubbles wakes Blossom up to help their sister. When they get there, they find only Grubber dressed as Buttercup, as Snake, Billy, and Arturo close in. Snake drops 2 cars onto the other Powerpuffs with a giant magnet and puts them on a conveyor belt to a trash compactor, where they're trapped inside of car cubes. Snake then uses the magnet again to lower them into a vat of boiling oil. Meanwhile, Buttercup is distracted because she's rocking out in their little shack in the junkyard all alone with Ace and can hear none of the ruckus even with her supersonic hearing. That is until she dances so hard she punches the wall down, knocking it onto the ground, and can see her sisters in peril. She rescues her sisters and beats up the Gangrene Gang, except for Ace, who plays innocent and blames the other boys. The can of whoop-ass she opens on the other 4 Gangrene Gang members is nothing compared to the can of whoop-ass she unleashes on Ace. Buttercup goes to her sisters, and Blossom asks what happened, and Buttercup says, "I'm sorry," which is the only line of dialogue she speaks in the entire episode. So I don't feel especially bad for the Gangrene Gang in this episode, but in general, I do feel bad because they're like homeless teens living in a shack in a junkyard. I do have my own personal headcanons for the Gangrene Gang and how they ended up there, which I will share. Just a little bit of a warning. I will briefly mention like child abuse as part of the reason they ran away. So I think Ace's mom left or died when he was really young, and his father was really abusive towards him. And Ace vowed never to become like him. He ran away from home when he was 7 to live in the junkyard and never looked back. Snake has been in and out of foster homes since he was fairly young. Similarly to Ace, Snake was abused by his foster parents. Once they nearly killed him, but he fought back in self-defense and they threatened to call the cops on him, so he left and hid in the junkyard for a while. Grubber never met his family. They left him near the junkyard shortly after he was born. He has always wondered why. I think that Billy is a missing person. His family got a big group together from out of state to go visit this amusement park in Townsville, but Billy wandered off and got lost. The carnival was fairly close to the junkyard, and he ended up getting in through a hole in the fence and staying in this tiny shed. His family is still looking for him. Arturo's dad, I think, actually loved him a lot, even though they didn't have much, but he was wrongfully arrested and has been trying to prove his innocence for years. On the way to meet his foster family, there was a car accident and Arturo was the only survivor. The rest of the Gangrene Gang found him and nursed him back to health. He was considered illegally dead until the gang took him to a hearing for his dad and he was witness at the trial. I also think that the reason that they're green is because after living in the junkyard for so long, they were exposed to a variety of chemicals over the years that altered their DNA in ways that haven't even been discovered yet. So, yeah, those are some of my headcanons about the Gangrene Gang. My question for the episode is, how badly on a scale from 1 to Buttercup did your first crush end? And so I'm not going to super go into detail on this, but I'm going to say probably a 7.5.
I don't really know.
That's fair.
My episode is Fuzzy Logic. So these 2 episodes first aired in the US December 9th, 1998. This is the first episode we see Fuzzy Lumpkins, although he also aired in a short called Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins in 1995. Fuzzy is voiced by Jim Cummings, who has had over 100 voice acting roles. Fuzzy is a big pink bear-like guy in jean bib overalls. He has a green nose and gray antennae. So as the episode opens, the narrator comments on how kind the Townsvillians are. Then we shift over to the woods beside Townsville, where Fuzzy Lumpkin lives. He doesn't like trespassers. He even uses his boomstick to shoot at butterflies. Fuzzy is basically a hillbilly who wants to relax and play his banjo, named Joe. Fuzzy falls asleep and wakes to find a squirrel. He tries to shoot the squirrel and chases it to Townsville. Here, Fuzzy gets hit by a truck. In the accident, Fuzzy has dropped several of his possessions, and he turns red with anger when the people of Townsville politely try to hand him back his items. He seems to have super strength in this red form. Fuzzy punches old ladies and policemen alike and makes great destruction all over Townsville. Next, we see the Powerpuff Girls fighting over Bubbles' stuffed Octi as the mayor calls for their help. They get to the scene and try to look for clues and ask who did it, but the citizens are too stunned to answer. A squirrel tells Bubbles the story, and she can understand him. The girls follow the flying squirrel to Fuzzy's. Meanwhile, Fuzzy contents himself with playing his banjo for a long time. He relaxes. The girls bust in and he turns red with anger again. His teeth are super sharp as he attacks the girls. He repeats that he doesn't want company. The squirrel grabs his banjo and they all toss it around. Fuzzy calms down after Buttercup threatens to burn his banjo. He is knocked out with the banjo and put in jail. At the end of the episode, a prisoner takes his banjo, and the narrator says he gets a warm, fuzzy feeling from the girls once again, saving the day.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out that Fuzzy kind of gets like a taste of his own medicine, because the inmate calls the banjo his property when he steals it from Fuzzy.
In this episode is the first time Bubbles uses her language and speaking with animals capability. And I had a couple of discussion questions. What item do you love like Fuzzy likes his banjo? And unfortunately, I probably would have to say my cell phone.
Honestly, probably yes. Probably like some piece of my tech, like my phone. But also maybe like some of my collectibles and stuffed animals. I would be very upset if someone was like, I'm going to burn these in front of you.
Well, they only did that to get him to calm down, but...
Yeah.
And then also, can you relate to Fuzzy not liking company or people touching his things? And I don't, in general, enjoy people coming over unannounced. And then as far as people touching my things, I would rather that they ask first. But I do believe Fuzzy way overreacted because it's not like the people in Townsville were taking his things or grabbing his things from him. They were actually returning them to him. I mean, maybe it was sort of a misunderstanding on his part, but he really overreacted.
Yeah. I would say I probably not to the extent of Fuzzy. I also don't enjoy having unannounced visitors or having my stuff touched. Just like ask me and I'll let you look at it. But otherwise, nah, don't touch my stuff. Alright, so next week we're going to be discussing Boogie Frights and Abracadabra. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you have enjoyed our little discussions, if you want to answer some of the questions that we posed at the end of each episode, it would be really cool if you could rate and subscribe to the podcast. Or if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button, leave a comment. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.